Good day, everyone. A blessed morning. Before anything else, I would like to first to introduce myself. I am Teacher William, and I am your teacher for today. Have you ever wondered why language was being exist and how language are being used as a medium of communication? Well, in this morning, let's talk about language as a tool of power and identity. So have you ever tried to ask yourself what is the connection between language to the power and that makes us our identity. So in this morning, let's talk about what is language. So language is not just a way of communication. It is a source of power and that makes our identity. Just for instance, we all know that Chabacano is a language. So Chabacano was actually a source of power because power it served as a medium of communication in order for us to understand each other. And let's also create our identity as Chabacano. The way language is used can influence who is heard and who is believed and who has the authority in a society. Specifically, language was being accessed or being used in a society as for us to use it as a communication and to communicate to our people. So language and power. So when you say power, it's a bent exercise to true language. When you say power as a language, these are talk about the people or the institution who decide which language will be used in our community, society, or even in our country, and what accent or vocabulary is considered correct or professional. So it is difficult for us to establish a language in order for us to use it in a certain society, certain community, or in certain country because it takes us for power. It takes us for the higher authorities which can decide what language will be used here in our country. So for further information, I'd like also to align that here in our country, it takes for us a year for us to establish what language will be used. Way back, we use as the Filipino spelled with letter P as a language, as our medium of language. Later on, it was being developed, changed into Filipino as in spelled with letter F and uh, letter F, then it later on it will be developed as our national language here in our country, which is the Philippines. So from that we can see that language is very a powerful weapon. In order for us to have the our language, it takes for us a power in order for us to establish what language will be used in a certain communities, country, or a society. So those who speak the dominant language gain advantage in education, employment, and government. Well, yes, in reality, the certain language was being dominant in a certain community or in a certain group of people, which may lead some advantages in our education, employment, or even in the government. Just for instance, here in our country, we use English as a main medium of language in order for us to communicate with our fellow Filipinos. So it is very important that language is not just about a medium of communication, but it serves as a power in order for us to establish what language will be used inside in our community, outside to our community, especially here in our country. So remember that language is a power. which means we, the people, we have the right, we have the power to choose what language will be used in our country. People who speak differently may be judged as less intelligent or less capable even when they are not. Well, there is according to my research, there are some studies that um, if a certain people cannot talk fluently in English, it might identify them as not totally good enough or capable, or not enough, not totally enough intelligent in terms of their language. Well, we commonly judge people according to language, the way you speak, the way you, the way you use your, the way you use the language in a certain context. And it's very important when a language was being used, it should be followed by a certain standard. Yeah, that's it's the reality between language, because language also can also be the determiner of intelligence. So sad to say, those who cannot speak in English fluently establish that this kind of a person who cannot talk fluently in English does not possess an intelligence, because intelligence was being measured according to the language used. Just for instance, in a formal setting, speaking fluently in English may be seen as a sign of intelligence or leadership, while local language or accent may be unfairly associated with being uneducated. Well, these are commonly issues here in our country. Well, if you are kind of a person that is not totally good in English, in talking to in English or in a certain language, you are identified as an uneducated, you are being labeled as low, not a leader, because we are being measured according to our language. So, you know that language is very powerful, because the way we use language, it creates our power, in order for us to show that language is not just about a language, but it's also about a power, the power how to use the language appropriately, and that's create our identity, whether we are a good speaker of a certain language. So let's talk about language and control. When you say language and control, this language can be used to control narratives and opinions. Just for instance, political leaders use language to persuade, influence, and manipulate public opinion. Like, I would like also to address this because to our politicians out there. Language is really has a control to manipulate, to persuade, and to to control our people, because language is a medium of vehicle in order for us to control our people. It's not just about the power, and also when you see you have the power, you also control the people. Just for instance, the political leaders use a lot language, like for example, if you are a good speaker and at the same time you are a public servant, so the way you use your language is must actually something to persuade our Filipinos, our Filipino people to vote you in this coming election. So you know, you can see that there is a control between language use, because it's not just about a language for us to communicate with other people, and it's something also to control other, to give your thoughts and opinions. Somehow it might cause us a disadvantage and advantages. And it's not just about controlling the language, it's about how to use the language properly. So like, just for instance, this is the most rampant issue. Like, the media language can highlight or silence certain group or issue. You know that media was the biggest form or platform of language in terms of media. that we know that a certain issues can be can be highlighted through a certain language that can be highlighted through the media. So we all know that media was being a broad platform for us to use in order for us to show or to highlight a certain issues. So these are something for us to control how language was being used in order for us to control a certain issue. Just for instance, like there is an issue between a certain politician, so in order for us to cover up those issues, we use media as as a medium, and the way we use language to persuade and to manipulate and to control their minds, especially our netizens in our media, to manipulate the minds, at the same time to change their perspective towards a certain politician. So you know that there is a huge control for a language in order for a certain issue to be covered. So lastly, we have labels and terms can shape how people and perceive. Like for instance, the illegal versus undocumented. So we all know that many issues, current issues that talks about illegal versus undocumented. So this language was being controlled by the media, by the people, by especially the language, because we cannot control people without language. You see how language is being powerful. It can control people in order for them to change their perspective, opinions, and thoughts in a certain issue or context. So the most common example for this is the calling a group troublemakers instead of fraudsters change how the public views of them. So you see that uh, how people can control language. Just for instance, we use the word troublemakers instead of protester. So from the troublemakers, you can see that this language was actually a negative thing for a certain people to be called, just instead to call fraudsters. So there is a huge impact in order for us to see the reality between the troublemakers and the fraudsters. Like we intend to use a harsh language or words in order for us to manipulate and to control the public views, just for them to make the public angry towards a certain politician or to a certain issue or specifically to a certain people. So now let's talk about language and identity. So what is the connection between language and identity? We all know that through language we can express who we are. Language, the language that we use, it's a reflection of our culture, backgrounds, and values. Yes, and it's very evident that the way we use our language, the way we show or express our thoughts to a certain language, it creates our identity. Just for instance, when someone far from the city, you know that their accent talk, especially in Chabacano, like it's too different from the native speaker of Chabacano because they live far from the city. So there is a language identity that called I este de Montes, and it's because the way they speak the certain language that creates their identity. the way they use their language or express their language, that also makes their identity. And it's very important that we use language appropriately, because language can create also our identity. What we say, what we use, what we express, that's make us our identity. So last, we have also the code switching, changing how we speak depending on the situation, show to the people to adopt the power structure. So yes, and it's very uh, timely and relevant in a certain context. Like for instance, so if we have a friend that is not actually same with our language use, just for instance, I am a Chabacano speaker and my friend is a Tausug speaker, so I need to use another language, just for instance a Tagalog, to in order for me or for them to understand, or to have the understanding towards each other when in a communication. So there will be a code switching, or using another language for us to use in a certain context or communication, for us to deliver our thoughts effectively. So losing a language can mean losing part ones of culture and identity. Yes, many studies shows that when we lose our language, that also we can lose our identity. If I'm not mistaken, study shows to us that the Latin was being lost in this time, that also makes their identity to be lost. So you see, the way that we use language in a period of time, that also creates our identity. It is also important for us to use language evidently, for us to maintain our language and to preserve our language. It's somehow to preserve our culture and our language, that also establish our identity towards our culture. So just for instance, a student may speak a local language at home but switch to in English to the school to fit in or to be taken seriously. So you see that we need to code switch from another language to your language, and it's simply because for us to feel in ourselves to a certain environment. And it's very important that we know to adapt other language in order for us to fit in. You see, language really can create identity. The way we use language, the way we express language, that also can make our identity towards in using the language. So let's talk about language as inclusion or exclusion. So when you say language can either include or exclude people. When you say inclusion, language makes people feel recognized and respected. When from the word inclusion, language was being used included. You are not being excluded. You are giving the opportunity to them to know the language, to recognize their language, to value their language. While on the other hand, when you say exclusive language, it was being marginalized by the people in a certain groups and reinforced in inequality. Like you are being excluded their language towards your language. There is an inequality between language use. Like you are not open for their language because you are prioritizing your own language. So just for instance, using gender neutral terms like of everyone instead of a guy, that creates a more inclusive environment. So you see that we from everyone instead a guy creates more inclusive environment. And it's important for us that when we use language, we are not going to exclude other language, because remember, language is not just about a communication. It's just about a power, identity that may control our power. So you see that language is not just a language, it's a medium for us to create a power that might control our identity. What we use a certain language, it might reflect, and it might something to control our power that makes us our identity. In my conclusion, I would like to say that language is not just a vehicle of information, but nor a language. It is a medium that makes every individual as a power pool that can control, that makes them that's create their identity. So I hope you have something learned from me in our discussion for today. I hope uh, you have some insights towards our discussion. So my next reporter will be discuss further for a certain topic related to the language also. Thank you. Once again, this is William Reyes, and thank you for listening.
Good day everyone, my name is Claudine Pisalenga, and for today I will discuss the gender language and discourse. So what is gender language and discourse? Gender language and discourse refers to how communication shapes and reinforces ideas about gender. It studies how words, expressions, and patterns of communication influence how society understands masculinity and femininity. It also recognizes that language is not neutral. The way we speak can strengthen stereotypes or challenge them. For example, if society constantly describes men as strong leaders, then women as caring and emotional, those repeated messages shape expectations about what men and women should be like. Gendered language. What is gendered language? Gender language focuses on specific words or phrases that show bias or assumptions about gender. These are often everyday expressions that may seem normal but carry stereotypes. Common examples are boys don't cry, you throw like a girl, be a man, calling a girl bossy while calling a boy confident, using he to refer to doctors or leaders by default. These examples show how language assigns certain traits to men and women. Over time, this influences how people see themselves and others. Gender discourse. What is gender discourse? Gender discourse looks at broader patterns in conversations, media, and society that reinforce gender roles. It is not just about single words, but about repeated messages and communication practices. Common examples are in movies, fathers are often shown as decision makers, while mothers are shown doing household work. In group projects, boys are encouraged to lead, while girls are expected to organize or take notes. Female public figures are often discussed based on appearance, while male figures are discussed based on achievements. These patterns shape what society considers normal for men and women. Let's do a quick recap. Gendered language refers to specific biased words or phrases. Gender discourse refers to larger communication patterns that reinforce gender norms. Gender language and discourse is the overall study of how communication shapes ideas about gender.
Good day, everyone. My name is Cassandra Caballes from BSED English 2A. In this part of the presentation, I will discuss why gendered language and discourse matter and some examples in real life. First, language influences social attitudes. The words we use in everyday communication can shape how people think and feel about gender. Language is powerful because it helps form our beliefs and perspectives about others. Okay, the second one we have language can reinforce or challenge stereotypes. For example, if we always describe men as strong and women as emotional, it can strengthen traditional stereotypes. However, using more balanced and respectful language can also help challenge these stereotypes. The third one we have understanding gender discourse helps promote equality. When people become aware of how language may favor or disadvantage certain genders, they can make better choices in the words they use. Now, finally, awareness leads to more inclusive communication by being mindful of our language. We can create conversations that respect and include everyone. Now, let us look at some examples in real life. Like, for example, in the media, men are often shown as strong heroes while women are portrayed as emotional characters, right? Another example is job titles, such as using chairman instead of the more inclusive term chairperson. Lastly, everyday conversation can influence what society expects from men and women. Okay, to conclude this topic, gendered language and discourse show that communication is not neutral. The words we use shape ideas about gender and social roles. By understanding this, we can promote more inclusive and fair communication. And that would be all about our topic. And thank you.
A pleasant day, everyone. I am Christine Clara Sardan from Briaset English 2A. Today, we'll learn about what is gender bias in society. But first, let's define what is gender bias. So, gender bias is the unfair treatment of people because of their gender. It happens when society believes that men and women should act in a certain way or have fixed roles. So, this unfair treatment happens when society has expectation about how men and women should behave. So there are many causes of gender bias. So gender bias exists because of these influence shape how people think from childhood until adulthood. First one is these stereotypes. So stereotypes believe like men are strong or women are emotional. So stereotypes are general belief about men and women. These ideas are unfair because not all people are the same, but society still uses them to judge others. So for example, if a female student becomes class president, some may say she is too emotional to lead. Or if a male teacher works in a kindergarten, many people question his job choice. So these reactions come from stereotypes. Next is culture and tradition. Old beliefs passed down over time. So gender bias continues because of cultural and traditional beliefs that have been passed down for so many years. So these traditions often assign specific roles to men and women, and people follow them without questioning if they are still fair today. So for example, in some homes, girls are taught to cook and clean at a young age, while boys are not asked to do housework. So over time, children grow up believing that this is normal and correct. Next is media. Movies and ads that show men and women in limited roles. So the media contributes to gender bias by showing men and women in limited roles. So for example, men are often shown as leaders, while women's are shown as caregivers. So which influence how people think gender should behave. Last is lack of education. So people are not taught about gender equality. Gender bias also exists because many people are not educated about gender equality. So when people are not taught that everyone deserves equal treatment, they may continue believing that unfair treatments about gender. Next is forms of gender bias. So we have in education. So girls may be discouraged from science or math. Boys may be discouraged from arts or caregiving roles. Society encourages or expects each gender to study certain subjects instead of letting them choose what they like. So for example, in some countries like the Afghanistan under the Taliban, girls were recently banned from attending secondary schools while boys could study freely. So this limits girls' opportunities to pursue careers in science, engineering, or other fields. In workplace, so many women may be paid less than men. So in some companies, women receive lower salaries even if they have the same skills and experience. So for example, if male a female employee rather and a male employee may have the same position, but the male employee earns more because he is seen as the main provider. Men may be expected to always be strong leaders. So men are often pressured to be confident and emotional. So for example, if a male employee admits that he is stressed, people might say he is weak. This makes it harder for men to express feelings or ask for help. In family roles, so women are expected to do housework. So even if a woman has a full-time job, she is often still expected to cook, clean, and take care of the children. So for example, after work, the mother prepares dinner while the father rests. So this creates an unequal division of responsibility. Men are expected to earn money. Men may feel pressured to financially support the family alone. If a man loses his job, he may feel ashamed because society expects him to be the provider. Next, in media. So women are shown as weak or dependent. Many TV shows portray women as needing rescue or depending on men. Young girls who watch this may grow up thinking they cannot be independent. Men are shown as dominant and unemotional. So men are often shown as aggressive, strong, and serious. Young boys may feel like they must hide their emotion to appear manly. Next is the effects of gender bias. So gender bias has many negative effects on individuals and society. It affects confidence, opportunities, and overall development. So we have number one, limits opportunities. So people may not given equal chances in school, work, or leadership. So for example, a qualified woman may not be promoted because her employers believe that men are better leaders. Number two, causes inequality. So gender bias creates gaps in salary, education, and power. So this inequality prevents society from becoming fair and balanced. Number three, lower confidence. So when people are constantly judged, they may start doubting their abilities. For example, a girl repeatedly told that boys are better in math may start believing in herself. And last, affects mental and emotional health. So discrimination can cause stress, anxiety, and frustration. Men who are told not to cry may hide their emotions, which can harm their mental health. So these are the ways to reduce gender bias. Number one, educate people about gender equality. So schools should teach all genders have equal rights and abilities. So for example, teachers can encourage both boys and girls to explain or to explore different subjects and careers. Second, treat everyone fairly. So give equal pay, equal respect, and equal opportunities. So for example, promotion should be based on skills and performance, not gender. Third is challenge stereotypes. When someone says that job is only for men, we should question that belief. So parents can also teach children that chores and responsibilities should be shared. And the last, promote respect and inclusion. Respect people's choices and abilities regardless of gender. For example, support a boy who wants to be a nurse or a girl who wants to be an engineer. To end my discussion, gender bias is a serious social issue that affect education, work, family life, and mental health. It limits human potential and creates inequality. By educating ourselves, challenging stereotypes, and treating everyone with fairness and respect, we can create a more equal and progressive society. So that's all for my topic.
I'm Jonathan Biquet from BSED English 2A. Today, we'll discuss a very important lesson. So, have you ever been judged or limited because of your gender? Why do some people think one gender is more important than another? So here comes sexism. Sexism is a prejudice or discrimination based on sex or gender, especially against women and girls. The term emerged from 1960s to 80s. Second wave, feminism likely modeled on racism. From civil rights movement, it can involve belief that one sex is superior or more valuable and imposes limits what men, boys, women, and girls can should do. Originally focused on women's oppression, expanded by early 20th century to include men, intersex, and transgender people. Sexism is treating someone unfairly because their sex or gender. It often affects women and girls, but it can affect anyone. It includes believing one gender is better or more important than another. For instance, a company refused to hire women for construction because they believe only men are strong enough to do the job. Also, we have sexism and patriarchy. So why do men often have more power in a society? How do gender roles shape what people expected to do? So sexism is most commonly applied against women and girls to maintain patriarchy, where a system has a male domination. And it operates through individual, collective, and institutional, ideological, and material practice, with oppression taking forms of economic exploitation, stereotypes based on biological sex. Traditional views frame women and weaker, less rational, suited for devalued domestic, nurturing roles and unfit for leadership in business, politics, and academia. Patriarchy is a system where men have more power in a society. Sexism helps keep this system in place to keep men in a higher position while female will live in a lower position with less opportunities. So men are seen as leaders. Women are expected to stay at home or care for others. Women may be seen as weaker or less capable. So, in some countries, women are not allowed to inherit property equally with men. Next, we have the misogyny and extreme sexism. So, what happens when sexism becomes extreme? Why are women sometimes blamed even when they are victims. So here comes the misogyny. The extreme form of sexism ideology is misogyny, hatred of women. Prevent misogyny linked to high rates of brutality, domestic violence, rape, commodification of women's bodies. Women may be seen as property of second-class citizens, and mistreatments occurs at individual and institutional levels. Misogyny means hatred or strong dislike of women. It is a more extreme form of sexism. So it includes violence against women, blaming women for abuse, treating women like an object. So for instance, a rape victim who gets attacked by people in online because they believe that women should wear long clothes, women should not join in party with boys. So these are the negative beliefs that people absorb in a society. So what this is what we call misogyny. So sexism and feminism. So how can we challenge unfair treatment based on gender? What can be done to create equal opportunities for everyone? Feminism study uses sexism concept to analyze inequality, rejecting biology as destiny. It argues barriers stem from prejudice discrimination, not biologically inferiority. So feminism distangled gender from biological sex, freeing women from stereotypes. The feminism movement fought to abolish sexism and establish equal rights under law. Goals include equality in politics, representation, employment, education, domestic disputes, and reproductive rights. Solution to gender inequality lies on changing sexism culture and institution. So feminism fights against sexism. It says men and women should have equal rights and opportunities. Feminism believes gender roles are created by society. Women are not less capable than men, and system should treat everyone equally. For instance, a campaign demanding equal pay for equal work between men and women. So next we have the sexism and the men's movement. Also experience unfair treatment because of gender. How do expectations affect both men and women? The term the term sexism evolved include men as victim of discrimination and gender expectations. Reverse sexism so emerged in backlash against affirmative action. Opponents claimed men face discriminations in jobs, school admissions. This was frustrating of feminism who emphasized women's systematic, structural, and historical oppression and warned of hypothetically female domination. The movement called for research on man's oppression and examined gender role limits on both sexes. So some groups say men can also face unfair treatment because of gender. They talk about issues like job discrimination, child custody. But many people argue that women have faced more long-term of wider inequality in history. So, example of a father automatically being assumed less suitable than a mother for primary child custody. Example of sexism. Where do commonly see sexism in daily life? How does sexism affect people opportunities and safety? In education, sexism appears as sexual harassment, gender biased, and women being discouraged from school. Two-thirds of global illiterates are female. And underrepresentation in leadership, violence against women in a global problem, one in three women experience in their lifetime. Such violence is often justified by sexism beliefs. Men's right to discipline women, blaming victims' clothing. So I want you to leave this quote. When a girl is silenced and told step back in school, it is not her ability that is limited. It is the future being erased. As sexism quietly steals her potential and replaces equality with ignorance.